In this lecture, you will get an overview of Agile followed by Scrum. My plan is to give you a big picture of all stakeholders and things related to Agile and Scrum. I will then go through each of them in depth in due course of time. This way, you will know where each fits in the big picture of Agile and Scrum. Hence, we are going to quickly run through them. Don't worry in case you don't understand some parts. I'll be covering them with more details in forthcoming sections. Also, depending upon your role within your team, some steps may not be applicable for you. Still, I recommend you to know them so that you get the big picture. It's not complicated, trust me. First, let's start with Agile. I am pretty sure you should have heard this term many times. There are many definitions and many ways of expressing it. However, the core concept is the same. Agile is the ability to create and respond to change. This single statement is crucial for both Agile and Scrum. This sums pretty much the whole purpose of embracing Agile within your team or organization. In both personal and professional life, change is the only constant. There will always be changes happening around you. Agile strives to embrace these changes. Next, let's look at some of the main characteristics of Agile. As mentioned before, the key part is in adapting and responding to changes. Moreover, they form the foundation for various frameworks like Scrum, Extreme Programming, and so on. Among these various frameworks, we are going to focus on Scrum in this course. Next, the team that shows Agile methodology works on self-organizing nature. This means they have more autonomy and can take decisions instead of relying on higher management. Also, the team members are cross-functional, wherein each of the team members can work on any of the modules available in a product. Finally, although there are various guidelines and process, Agile at its heart is a mindset. By the end of this course, you will have the right mindset who will be ready to apply the learnings at your work. Next, let's move on to Scrum. Scrum is a framework. It is a process framework used to manage product development and other knowledge works. Do not confuse Agile and Scrum. Agile is a methodology. Scrum is a framework that is used to implement the Agile methodology. Some teams use the terms interchangeably. I'll be using Scrum term for the entire course. Next, let's look at some of the characteristics of Scrum. The term Scrum comes from the game of rugby to move the ball down the field. In Scrum framework, you work as a team to move towards the team's goal. Scrum fosters continuous improvement so that the product's quality is improved on a continuous basis. The improvements need not be only those that are major. Any minor improvements too are fine. Moreover, you take one step at a time when it comes to product development. Hence, you start with a minimal viable product that basically refers to a working product with bare minimum features. You then continuously add new features to it. Finally, Scrum was first applied for software development. It was observed with immense success and hence became very famous in the software industry. Although you hear it being used in software industry a lot, it is not restricted to only the software industry. Next, you might be wondering how does it affect your day-to-day life at work? Also, how it is different from the traditional approach of software development. In the software industry, Waterfall Approach is a very popular one. In this approach, the product goes through a series of steps that covers one major aspect of the product development. Firstly, the requirements are gathered from the concerned stakeholders such as the customers and internal users. Once the requirements are consolidated and validated, it goes through the design phase. In this step, the engineering team designs the product that includes the various internal components. The architect captures the communications between the various components and how it has to be structured. Thirdly, it enters the core development stage wherein the implementation of the product is carried over by the development team. For most of the teams, this step takes the most time among the product development time frame. Fourthly, the development code is packaged and sent for testing, wherein the product is thoroughly validated against the requirements. The bugs identified are tracked and fixed by the development team. Finally, the product is deployed at the customer site. As you can see, it goes through a cleanly identified steps. It follows like a waterfall and hence the name. For small teams and products, it might look good, but it comes with various limitations such as increased time to market, complexity in getting early feedbacks, difficulty in changing the requirements in the middle of the development, and various other reasons. The Scrum approach is radically different compared to the waterfall model. Here, the stages of product development, namely requirements, design, development, testing, and deployment all remains the same. However, the key difference is how the overall development is structured. Instead of taking one big piece at a time, Scrum takes one small piece at a time. First, among the complete list of requirements, a small part of it that are of high importance are taken. It goes through design, development, testing, and deployment. By the end of this stage, the customer has a working piece of software deployed on its premise. This period is called a sprint, the most popular duration of sprint being 2 weeks. In the Scrum approach, you have many such sprints and they are typically named sprint 1, 2, 3 and so on. In each of these sprints, you repeat the same steps that was mentioned before, but with a new set of high-level requirements from the global requirements list. This is repeated until you complete the implementation of all the requirements laid out by the customer. Next, let's look at Scrum Roles, that refers to the role of team members who are part of the Scrum team. In Scrum, you got 3 main roles. First, you have the product owner, who, as the name suggests, is the owner of the product. He takes care of the requirements and prioritizes the items. He is the person who decides which items needs to be implemented first. Next, you have Scrum Master, who makes sure the team follows the Scrum principles and addresses any challenges faced by the team on a day-to-day basis. Last, you have the developers, who implements the requirements in the language as selected by the team. The Scrum team implements the requirements through a series of events. These events are referred to as Scrum Events or Scrum ceremonies. Just like the Waterfall approach, Scrum also goes through a series of events. It all starts with the sprint. Sprint is a fixed duration, say 2 weeks, wherein the team is going to work towards achieving a specific goal for the sprint. During the beginning of it, the team meets up for an event called sprint planning, wherein they decide the list of all features to be implemented in this sprint and calculate the time required to implement them. Moreover, the team meets on a daily basis to know what each of the team members have done the previous day, what items will be taken up for the current day, any challenges being faced by them, and so on. This is known as daily Scrum or stand-up meeting. Then the next few days, the developers takes care of implementing the requirements that was selected during the sprint planning meeting. Towards the end of the Scrum, the team again meets together to review each of the items that were selected in the current sprint and their current progress overall. Once the review of the sprint has been done, the team takes up the final event known as the sprint retrospective, wherein they look at what went good, what went wrong, and what items can be improved for the next sprint. This is part of the continuous improvement process that we talked about earlier. The team uses a board, namely Sprint Board, to track the items as part of the product development. The usage of this tool is needed as there can be lots of requirements that needs to be tracked closely to monitor their completion. There are many tools available in the market, but the core features of all those Scrum Board products are going to be the same. First, list of all requirements collected from the customers are grouped under product backlog. This can contain any of the requirements that has been gathered from customers or internal stakeholders. During each sprint, the team picks the high priority items from this product backlog and decides to implement in the current sprint. This selected list is called as sprint backlog. As you can guess, sprint backlog is a subset of the product backlog. Once the backlog items are selected for the current sprint, the sprint backlog is considered locked. This means that no more items can be added to the backlog, nor the selected items can be removed from the existing backlog. This gives a clear picture for the team about the exact items that are going to be covered in the current sprint. Next, over the course of the sprint, the developers implement each of the backlog items present in the sprint. Depending upon the team, the backlog items are either assigned to the individual team members, or the team members can pick the items that are more relevant to them. To track visually, the item is moved from sprint backlog to the doing category. The idea is that the developer is going to move the item from sprint backlog to the doing stage, followed by the done stage. If an item is marked as done, it means that that particular item has been completely implemented. Also, it is tested and checked into the source control systems. By the end of the sprint, it is expected that all the items that has been selected for the sprint backlog has been moved to the done stage. By now, you should have got a big picture of Agile and Scrum. From here on, you will be taken through a step-by-step process of the Scrum framework. You will start from the scratch and pass through each of these stages that you had seen so far. I will show you the exact items required, details to be captured, their format, and so on. Don't worry, it's going to be a fun ride with lots of hands-on activities.